Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we are taking a look at the FSS Boeing 727-200 freighter for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I am a real-world airline pilot, and in today's video I'll take you for a flight in this retro aircraft as we see what it's all about. It's recently been released, it's available through Aerosoft at the moment. It's just over 40 euros, I think it's about 48 US dollars at the moment, and it is a detailed, fully complete simulation of this aircraft. And I say fully complete in the sense that it is not an early access. It has all its features with it at the moment, and we're going to see those today. It has some amazing retro things, like it does not have an FMS, of course. It uses an INS, inertial navigation system, and a few other things that make it very interesting to operate. Originally designed for a 3-crew team, so it is an old airplane, first flew in the early 1960s, and they have done some clever things here to make it very possible for you and me to fly this in our home simulations without needing a 3-crew team. Flying airliners in Microsoft Flight Simulator is always a bit of a tricky task when there's a lot going on, because of course they are designed to have at least 2 pilots, and these 3-crew airplanes can be particularly tricky. So I am very pleased to say that in this airplane it is possible to fly it with just one of you, and I'm going to show you how in today's video. It also means that there's lots of features and systems in the airplane that are modelled, but you don't have to get too involved with if you don't want to. So we're going to see that and see how they've balanced the difficulty with the authenticity of this retro airplane. As I said, the Boeing 727 first flew in the early 1960s. At the back here we have 3 engines. It's Boeing's only tri-jet airliner. It uses the JT8D engine, so an engine that we've also seen used in the 737 Classic series, or as some call them, the Jurassic series, the early 737s, the first generation. It's a very pretty airplane, very popular, and it's, from what I've heard, very nice to fly from the few interviews and so on I've seen around the internet. It was a very well liked airplane. Interestingly, it uses the same fuselage cross-section and cockpit sort of design and format and shape as the Boeing 707. Boeing made the 727 in order to service the smaller airfields that airliners wanted, because the Boeing 707 had quite a long takeoff roll and was quite a big airplane in that sense, so that Boeing came up with the 727 as a way of getting around that and allowing an aircraft that could be a bit more independent, a bit smaller, get into these airfields. It was eventually, of course, replaced by the Boeing 737, and the larger side of it, because of course the 737 is a bit smaller, was replaced by the 757 project. Like I say, this is a really detailed simulation of the aircraft. We're going to take it for a full flight, and we're going to have a look at how we can navigate it, how we can use the autopilot, or what parts of autopilot it has, and we'll see how it hand flies as well, of course. We're going to start here in East Midlands, a classic cargo airfield, and we're going to take it just for a very short flight up the road to Newcastle, so I can take you through those systems and take a look at the airplane in the sky. Now, as I said, I am a real-world airline pilot. I currently fly the Boeing 787 aircraft in real life. I previously flew the Airbus A320. This airplane is very different to both of those for a number of reasons. However, once it's in the air, it is largely slimmer, aside from its navigation and automatics, which are the things that are missing. But it was certainly, the real aircraft would have been operated in a very different way to what I'm used to. So I'm going to do my best to give you some extra context and just talk about some things I find novel and interesting about an airplane like this. Especially, I'm a big fan of retro aircraft. Those of you who've seen my channel before will know that. So yeah, this is certainly one that was definitely going to pique my interest. But you'll see today why I think this is actually a very good proposition if you have any passing interest in the 727 or flying an airliner from this generation. First of all, we're going to walk around the outside just to get a look at it, and you can see they've gone for a nice weathered look, which is crucial to an airplane of this generation. You can see the stains running down from the window where the water runs over the screws. A common thing on airplanes, you see it often on passenger windows. This is only the freighter variants of this aircraft included in this edition. The passenger variant is not got a release date as far as I'm aware. It is to come in the future, but yeah, there's no schedule on that, so you will have to be happy with the freighter variant. Not much operating wise that's too different to the front, but there are things like the famous air stairs in the rear tail in the passenger variant, things like that, which I don't know if they work in here. I haven't been able to get them to work, but maybe when we're powered up. Anyway, maybe they do. But as we go in closer, you'll see that the detail is very nice. It is not the most detailed exterior model I've seen on an aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it is also not a bad one either. So you can see here things like the pitot. They look relatively simple, and they're sort of blanked out. They haven't actually got the inlets and so on. And as we move down the side, you'll see more like that. However, you can get to a reasonable distance and still have a satisfying texturing. There's nice dirt and grime. I think they've used the different PBR textures really nicely as well. In particular, highlight is the wings. They look absolutely super, and again, really modelled that grime like I wanted to see it, because this airplane by now would be looking pretty grimy, and they wouldn't have looked particularly clean in service either. Most airliners don't. Yeah, it's just a feature we get from flight simulators. Really, they typically get pretty dirty pretty quickly, even aircraft just a few years old. So yeah, I think they've done a really nice job with it. It's definitely proportioned correctly as well. You've got the hanging down Kruger flaps here, which I believe is because of a lack of hydraulic pressure. I'm not sure if they're meant to stay like that or not. There's a lot about this airplane I don't fully know, but we will do our best, and we will get through a full flight with you today, like I say. There are some interesting features. So we have obviously our cargo door, which you can operate through switches upstairs, and as we move through the cargo hold, oh, there you go, you can see all the different cargo, including some horses at the back, which I do like. Nice to have that detail. Things like engine blanks can be installed as well using the menu in the flight deck. So this is the JT8 engine that we were talking about earlier, and we'll get a closer look at that later. But yeah, huge great fin on the back of this airplane. Really surprising. This is a big tail, I suppose because it's quite a short aft of the wing area, so they need to increase the surface area at the back, because otherwise you'd have most of it in front of the wing and it could destabilize the airplane. But yeah, massive great fin, which is really surprising considering that it only has these engines centre mounted. Some features of having centre mounted engines are quite interesting really. First of all the thrust is through the centre of the fuselage, so this style of airplane, unlike the 707 that came before it, which would have had engines under the wing, this moved back to this sort of rear design which we saw for a few generations around this age, and then disappeared for good after that really, certainly in the large commercial airliner area. But yeah, they are centre mounted, so when you apply thrust it doesn't make the airplane point nose down or nose up, it just comes straight through the centre of the airplane, which is really nice. Another great advantage, if you lose one engine, you've still got most of your thrust near the centre of the fuselage, so it doesn't actually create much yaw either, so quite easy to handle an engine failure on takeoff. I say easy, the performance would be severely degraded, but better than having the engines out here. Because of course if your engines are out on the wing, if one of them fails you've got a big yaw moment which tries to turn the airplane around the centre of gravity. So yeah, really nice. And of course by having three engines, the chance of losing two on the side, you know, very slim. So you've got your two engines, would be whichever way you set it up, you'd have two engines pretty close to the centre of the airplane. So really nice for the pilots, I would have thought. Perhaps one of the reasons they enjoyed flying it would have made the sim checks quite pleasant, I would hope. But yeah, there we go. You can see as you come upstairs to the top of the elevator, look, there are some areas that are a little bit less detailed than others. I've got to say, I didn't notice this until I got the drone out and started moving it around the airplane. From any reasonable perspective, and when you fly it around and you see the light bouncing off the flight deck, I think it does look lovely. And they've done some good modelling as well, so it does have the right shape. And even here we have the tyres with these chimes along the side. These are so that when you go through a puddle, the water is actually forced out. So if you look at a normal airplane taking off, if it flies through a puddle, the water would fly up over the wing and down the side of the airplane, which is great because the engines then are protected. They don't get hit by that water. On an airplane like this, you need those chimes because then the water is actually forced outwards and low underneath the wing, and that protects the engines at the back from just ingesting all that water. So yeah, they've got the modelling just right on that sort of thing. Some cool features about this airplane. Look at that. Look at the mechanism for the cargo door. That's fantastic. What a piece of engineering. And yeah, look, we've even got all the nets modelled inside there. Really nice. Really nice. This is the, I believe, this is either the pack inlet or the pack and the APU inlet. So curiously, the APU is fitted into this sort of box fairing on the 727. There's no space for it in the tail because we have our three engines there. So the APU is sat right under there, so it must have been very noisy as a passenger sitting above it if the APU was in use. And here's the exhaust for the APU on top of the wing. What a strange design. That does really surprise me. I assume rain and so on might well run into it, but I guess it didn't really matter. But yeah, interesting design choice to have the APU exhausting right in the wing, right next to the fuel tanks. But there we go. I'm sure they had a reason, and you know, where else are they going to put it? It was features like having that APU that allowed this airplane to be so capable in servicing small airfields that didn't have perhaps the ground equipment to support larger aircraft. In terms of size, it's interesting to note this is actually about as heavy as an A320 or an A321. That's sort of the category it sits in, and this is the 200 version. So yeah, it's not actually a very big or heavy airplane. it's under 100 tons. So yeah, for context, the airplane I currently fly, the 787, depending which one you're looking at, has takeoff weights around 250 tons. So yeah, it's quite a big difference. So it is a relatively small airplane, and I think this could serve nicely for those of you wanting to fly shorter routes around your areas. Right, it's time to get the airplane powered up, and we're going to see how simple we can make that. Here we are on the flight deck, and as I say, simplicity is the name of the game. How are we going to get this airplane to be the flight sim experience we want it to be? So you have options here. If you want to go full checklist, you absolutely can. They actually print the checklist here on the flight engineers station, and you can see here battery, fuel quantity, boost pumps, cross feed valves, blue pumps, hydraulic engine oil quantity, bleed valves, APU, all of that, and that is totally possible to do. So let's do it. Let's turn on the battery and just see how the airplane behaves, just to prove it works. Battery on, and now the airplane gets some of its power, but it's not getting a lot, and it's going to quickly drain. So what we need to do now is think about getting our APU up and running. So I'm going to do that by going to the aux power unit, APU, and I'm going to turn it on. Now you would, of course, do things like your fire test and so on, but I do not know the procedures for all of that, but there is a test button there. Oh, there you go, leaving the opposition, run the test. Looks good. Let's turn it on. So hold that and start. So here it comes. Got an exhaust temperature. This orange light is telling us that the electrical circuit is not closed, so this APU is not providing us power. We are just sitting here on battery. We do also have the external power plugged in if we want as well, but just to show you how you might do it through the APU. Makes a fantastic noise. Venting out now over that wing. So that's up and running, or it's still coming, the EGT is stabilized. So once it is, we're going to close the circuit so the generator can supply us with power. So let's do that. Close. And now the airplane truly comes to life, and we're supplying it with electrical power. So there you go. That is just a little taster for how this airplane can be run manually. Like I say, you can go through the entire setup like that if you'd like to, running through all these checklists, running the fuel switches. You can swap them around, run the boost pumps, and all sorts. It's quite impressive. But that's a lot of work. You've got a lot of different panels to work on, and they're not all located conveniently. You know, normally we sit here and we just look up here if we need a system. That's not the case if you were to do it like this. You also need to come back here, in particular during the startup flow, in order to run things like the hydraulic systems, the generators, and you have to even synchronize the generators, which is quite an impressive feature. But what we're going to do now is just see how simple we can make it. So back cold and dark now, and this is how the airplane loads up by default if you put it on stand. And let's have a look at this. This is a great feature. You have a little clipboard down here. We can go into here and you can see, first of all, the aircraft tab where you can choose your doors and so on, which ones you want open. Then you can remove your engine covers, connect to ground power if you want to, so we can connect that. And we've got cones and chocks outside, which is absolutely fine. You can choose your panel state, so we'll have cold and dark, obviously. And I've got it set to have the INS, Civ A INS, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. That's for navigating. What we're going to do is go to pre-flight. I've got my SimBrief flight plan, so you can just put in your SimBrief weight. So there's our flight plan, EGNX to EGNT, and then I'm going to let it load those in. So you just press play, and then you can just skip to the end. And there we go, we have our fuel and our cargo all loaded. Good, and there's our weights. But here's the trick. So let's just close away the clipboard. If you click on this little phone down here, it brings up a phone, and you have the flows that you can actually get it to do, and it will actually action them step by step. So if we do the pre-flight check, the airplane, the engineer will now turn on the battery, just as we did earlier. So you can see the battery has closed. Now they're doing the APU fire test, and then it gets reset. Look at this, absolutely brilliant. So you could follow this through if you wanted, and we've seen this before with some complex airplanes, but it's been really nicely implemented here. Incredibly simple to use. There you go, APU now being started. And all you need to do is sit there and wait until it's done. So this amber box will change to green, and then you know you have your pre-flight procedure complete. So all I need to do now we've loaded the airplane, is I need to just think about how we're actually going to run our departure. Absolutely brilliant. I think it's a great feature because, like I say, you wouldn't be expected to do all three things. But like I said as well, you absolutely can if you want to do it. It is available for you to do. There you go. So they've now moved the power over to the APU by moving this switch round. That's brought the airplane to life. Whilst the engineer's hard at work there setting up the airplane, let's have a look at some other features in this phone. So you can have the fuel heater operating automatically if you need it. You can have the pack temperature being controlled automatically rather than us having to adjust it. So that's quite a handy feature to have on. You can have it set the airspeed bug to the climb and descent profile. Let's stick that on because I don't actually know those off by heart, so that will help me to have that bug move for me. EPR limits. So this is the engine pressure ratio. It's an interesting design choice not to use the N1. EPR, as it's known, or engine pressure ratio, is used in Rolls-Royce aircraft these days, but here we have it as well, and it is a strange number. You can see it runs from 0 to 3.0, so your maximum thrust for takeoff or your maximum thrust for a go-around will be listed as one of these numbers. But again, don't worry too much. It's all made very simple because all I need to do is tick this on, and now it will move the little white triangle to where the limit is at each stage of flight. Very clever feature. And fuel feed, balance of fuel. Well, definitely, I don't want to have to do that because otherwise you're going to be in the climb and you're going to have to come over here and start changing fuel tanks around. Again, it's an option. Some people will like it, I'm sure, but it is not necessarily for me. Let's just put the lights on so we can see it nicely. There we go. Excellent. It takes a while, this pre-flight check, but there we go. Things like stall warners being run and other things. Autopilot disengage test has been done there. Good. So we need to do our normal piloty things though. So let's set up the QNH, which we have done. So we're on QNH of 1013 today, which is yeah, interesting. We're just going to cage this artificial horizon just to make it level, as we would need to do. And we're going to set up our flight instruments as we want it. Now, there is not much in terms of automatics on this airplane. It does have a flight director, but it's not the most intuitive thing to use ever, and I don't even think it's that particularly useful. Either I'm using the autopilot or I'm flying it raw data, as it were, but that is up here, and we'll talk about that once we get going. But I'm going to leave it off for the takeoff. I don't think there's a mode here that works for takeoff particularly well. I guess you could tilt it up like that if you really wanted to, but I don't particularly want to. So we'll leave it. We've also got our INS navigation system down here. Now this does take a bit of focus because this is effectively replacing our FMS. Now I said I want to keep this simple, and there is a way to do that. If you go to your clipboard, you can simply choose to have as your navigation. You go back to the aircraft tab. You can just have the GNS 530, and that is just a normal GPS that sits there, and you can enter your route, or if you loaded it into Microsoft Flight Simulator, you could have your route ready to go in there, and it would already know, and you could then choose to use this switch between nav and GPS, put it as a GPS, and you can get the airplane to fly along the magenta line for you. But it's quite novel, and as we have this engineer working for us in the back, I thought it'd be quite good to actually take a look at the INS, because it's a short route we're going to fly today, and I'll show you how it works briefly. So first of all, let's get it set up, and all we're going to do is enter our route. So, and that's pretty much all it can provide us. It doesn't do fuel calculations or anything like that like a modern FMS does. Here's our route. We're going to take off from East Midlands and fly up towards the Trent VOR. This is a radio navigation aid, so we don't actually need to put this into the INS, the inertial navigation system. What this system does is it uses gyroscopes to sense how the airplane moves over the planet Earth. So what you do is you turn it on, you let it align, which means it just spins until the gyroscopes are all level, and then you tell it where in the world it is. So we'll put in the coordinates of exactly where we've aligned it, where we're starting from. Then, as we move the airplane, even by 1 mile an hour, it can sense that. It senses the motion. So it knows you've accelerated by up to 1 mile an hour, and then it knows when you decelerate back to 0 miles an hour. So therefore, because it knows how long you were at 1 mile an hour, it can then tell where you've moved over the planet, and it knows in which direction you accelerated as well. So it's a very clever system. This is what was used to fly across the Atlantic back in the day before we had GPS options to do it, and it still is used on airplanes today in a more modern and form factor. But there we go, more integrated form, I should say. Right, so there's up to Trent, then we go to the Pole Hill VOR, and then that takes us on an airway basically straight to NATEB, which is overhead the Newcastle airfield. So all I'm going to do is I'm not going to put in all these waypoints in between. There's no point. I'm going to put in where we're starting from. I'm going to put the Trent VOR, the Pole Hill VOR, and the NATEB waypoint. Now, you don't need to do this. You could just navigate using the VORs. I have a video on needle tracking if you want to do that. Or, of course, you could just have your GPS flight plan and put it into, effectively, LNAV like you would know in your other aircrafts. But we're going to load it up and we're going to send it through Trent and Pole Hill. And the reason I'm going to do this is just to prove it, as if these waypoints didn't have radio beacons. They do, so you could just tune those, like I say, but we'll just pretend we'll just have it as a backup, really. Why not? So first of all, we need to tell it where we are. So let's go to East Midlands Airport, and you go to the taxi charts, and we go to the parking stands and coordinates. And there's the reason we have these coordinates. We're parked up on here. We are on, I believe we are on 120. So you have these coordinates here exactly for this reason, so you can align your airplane. These days, most airplanes know where they were left, or they use a GPS to update that, but this time we need to tell it. So stand 120 is here, and there's the waypoint. So let's start by putting this to align. So we move the switch to align, and now it will start spinning those gyroscopes and getting itself ready. Next, let's put it to pause on the dial. So we've turned it to align up here, and then I've gone for pause on the dial. Let's see if I can get some more light for you. Okay, so we have a bit of light down here now. Let's take a look at the INS, Inertial Navigation System. How does this system work? Well, what it is it's a little gyroscope box, really, or it controls a box of gyroscopes that will know where they were aligned. So what do I mean by that? What it means is we turn on these gyroscopes, get them spinning, and then we tell them where on planet Earth we are. We give them the coordinates. Once they know that, the gyroscopes will sense the acceleration of the airplane. Gyroscopes are used extensively. For example, Artificial Horizon and so on will all use gyroscopes because they can stay level over the Earth. So what you do is you're giving it the option to know where it started from, and then it will sense the acceleration. So once the airplane moves, let's say the airplane increases its speed, it will sense that acceleration. Let's say you increase to 5 miles an hour. So we're now moving at 5 miles an hour. It will know that, and it will know the direction you're moving, because obviously it wants to stay level. So it would have felt that force on it. It's now moving at 5 miles an hour, and it knows the direction. So when it senses a reduction in that acceleration back to 0, it will know that you've stopped. And now it will know where you are. So it knows where you've ended up on planet Earth. It's very clever. There are some errors in it, so it does over time wander and it's not perfect, but it is a very clever system. It was used to fly across the Atlantic for a long time before things like GPS came along, and it is still used in modern airliners today. The 787 certainly uses it. It's a bit more integrated and there's some more redundancy, and it's a very clever system, but it is essentially using the same principles as this box here. We now, of course, have GPS, but all we do with GPS is update this information. We still have this running in the background all the time on all modern jet airliners. It's just such a valuable and an internal piece of navigation equipment that we can find our way around even without anything coming in from outside. Very, very clever. So that means we need to turn it on, get the gyroscope spinning, and then tell it where on planet Earth we are. We give it the exact coordinates so that it knows where it's starting from, and then it will feel all the acceleration subsequent to that, and it will know where we are. And it can do some simple things like show us how fast we're moving over the ground, so our ground speed, which is a very handy feature because you wouldn't know that without a box like this on board or a GPS. It can also tell us the direction we're moving over the ground and how long it's going to take us to get to these places, and it can even tell us the wind where we are, because it knows which way we're pointing and it knows which way we're actually moving, so it can calculate the wind for us. So to align it and turn it on, all you need to do is move this little switch to align. It's now spinning up those gyroscopes, getting ready, and we need to tell it where we are in the world so it can start. So if I go to my charts and I go to parking stands, this is why we have these charts. They tell us the coordinates of where we're starting, because a lot of airplanes need you to tell it. Now these days airplanes know where they're starting from. They tend to use either the GPS or the last position, but you may sometimes, in some unique circumstances or in certain parts of the world, have to tell it, and that's what we can do now. So we're on stand 120 over here, so I need to tell it those coordinates. So it's aligning. We have it set to 0, and I set it to pause down here on the dial. It needs to be on pause, which is position, so it's telling it where we're starting from. Then we type it in. So the coordinates are N52497. So I press the N first, and then 52497, insert. Now it goes to the east-west coordinates over here. So these are longitude-latitude coordinates. So west is 00120.8. So I go 001. Oh, sorry, no, you've got to start with the west. Right, west, there we go. and you'd have to press E if you wanted it to start with E, so it needs you to start with one of those. 0, 0, 1, 20.8. And now we check those. So 52.49.7, 52.49.7, and 001 20.8, 001 20.8, and then insert. There we go. Now it knows where we're starting from, and you can see it's gone from 0 to 1. So that means from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1. Now it doesn't know where waypoint 1 is yet, I haven't told it, but it is now aligning itself based on this. Soon we'll get a green light up here that will tell us that it's ready, and then we can start entering the rest of the waypoints. If we look at the, oh, not the checklist, which sadly does not work, by the way. There is no checklist built in the integrated system. That is a shame. I love that system, but it is not here on this one. The saving grace is that we have that little automatic procedure flow on the phone, which is very clever. So all I'm going to do is set it some waypoints that we're going to use. So I'm going to tell it the Trent waypoint, which is actually a VOR, the Pole Hill waypoint, and I'll tell it NATEB. Now, both Trent and Pole Hill are actually VORs, so we can navigate towards them using radio navigation aids. What I mean by that is you can tune them down here in our navigation box, and then we can set our navigation equipment to point at them. And I will show you how to do that in this flight. I also have a video on tracking needles if you need that on my channel. But yeah, I will show you how to navigate using the radio nav aids. But in the background, we'll also have this INS, because this INS can fly me to any waypoint in the world. I don't need to have a radio navigation aid. I can just tell it the coordinates where I want to be. So I could just type into here an airport, and I can use this to navigate straight to it. It's very, very clever. But I'm going to have it as a backup. So we have Trent and Pole Hill, and then NATEB is not actually a radio navigation aid. It is just a waypoint. So I'm going to type in the NATEB waypoint as well, and then we can fly towards them as we need to. So there you go. The ready nav light is now on. So I'm going to set it to nav, and that light goes out, and now we can start entering our waypoints. Now I do actually have the full flight plan from SimBrief available to me, which is going to help with the typing in those coordinates, because they're formatted ever so slightly different. So first of all, the Trent VOR, let's get that right. Okay, so let's now enter in our first waypoint. To do that, we need to go to waypoint on our little dial, and then you can see that it still has the coordinates because it's on set to 0, so it's showing us where we are. And if I move that to 1, we get blank because we haven't entered the waypoint yet. So first waypoint, Trent VOR, what are the coordinates? Well, you can see that if you click on it in Navigraph, you actually get some coordinates here, but these are formatted differently to what the INS accepts. This only takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 digits, whereas this obviously has more. So you need to be a little bit careful. It's easier if you use your SimBrief full actual flight plan to do it, which is what I'm going to do now. So I know the Trent VOR coordinates are 53, so north 53.03.2, insert, and it is west 001.402. 001.402, 53.03.2. Now, insert, and then I go to waypoint 2, which is the Pole Hill VOR, north 53.44.6, insert, and west 002.06.2, 53.44.6, 002.06.2, insert. And finally, waypoint number 3 is going to be north 55.02.3, and it'll be west 00. Oh no, see, that's gone wrong because I didn't press insert. So now this is my point about this. You must get these coordinates right. If you get one digit wrong like that, look at that, 2340.0 north. I mean, you're going to have it way out, way out. This was so rigorously checked. When these were in use, these were checked so carefully, especially when being used for international flights over the ocean, because you just could not afford to get it wrong, because you wouldn't have any visual clues outside where you are. You could easily get it wrong. So yeah, let's redo waypoint number 3. So this is NATEB. This is the waypoint overhead the airfield in Newcastle. This is the most useful one, really. So let's get it right. So we're going to have... So we're still typing it in. Good. Right, so it's 55.023, and it's north. So north, 55.02.3, insert. Now we go west, 00141.9. So 55.02.3 north, 00141.9 west. Insert. And that is it. I know some of you would already be fed up with this, but that is all the waypoints in. So you would obviously check them again, north and west, make sure that you've got it all the way around. But there we go. So we have our starting position, we have the Trent VOR, Pole Hill VOR, and then NATEB. And that is it. Now it's running, it's aligned, it can navigate us there. I'm going to leave the auto swap over down here, and all I'm going to do is set it to whichever screen I fancy having. So I'm actually going to have it set to track ground speed, because that's going to be the most useful for me for our initial departure. And I'm going to leave it this little dial just showing waypoint number 0 for now. You can see it is sequenced, so over here we can see that it wants to fly from waypoint 0 to waypoint number 1. As we overfly waypoint 1, it will automatically, as we've got set here, swap over and go from waypoint 1 to waypoint 2, and it will do that up to 9. You can have 9 stored points on here, and then you can actually set it so that it can cycle back to 0 to 1 again. So you can keep entering them as you go, something you don't have to do these days in airplanes, in more modern aircraft, of course. But this is exactly how they flew for a long time, for a good couple of generations. So there we go. Right, so now let's think about how we're actually going to fly the departure, Trent 2 November. This is the next bit we need to set up ourselves as the pilots. So again, you can tell the aeroplane to do lots of things, but it won't through this little phone, but it won't be able to set up things like your navigation aids. So we're going to take off. We're going to, at 1 mile from the locked DME of India Echo Mike Echo 10935, make a right turn, track 298 degrees, and then intercept the 340 degrees inbound course to the Trent VOR. So how do we set that up? Well, I can also see a stop altitude of 6,000 feet. So first of all, I'm going to put that in. 6,000 feet into the little altitude sector. 456. If you want to set hundreds of feet, you can do that using this little switch on the left. So 6,000 feet altitude selector. It looks like a landing altitude selector. It is not. It is your actual altitude selector. So we're going to go up to 6,000 feet. This will now give us warnings, and it enables the autopilot to level off there if we ask it to. Good. Next, I'm going to tune the India Echo Mike Echo 109.35. Here's our tuning boxes. Now we have 2 navigation boxes, 2 ADF boxes, and 2 COM boxes. So in our nav box, I'm going to put 109.35, 109.35, and I'm going to put this on the other side as well, and there's a reason for that, which I'll explain shortly. 109.35. Now, it's tuned, but you can see there's a little rocker switch. You need to select the side you want, and then a little light appears. So 109.35 is selected on both sides because we have the DME shown up here in miles. That is for my on-side tuned navigation aid, so that would show up here, and then we can have down here the DME for the off-side. So this is the DME coming from the FO side, which is also set to 109.35. So what I can actually do is cheat. Why do I need my side set to 109.35 when I already have it displayed from the FO? So now what I'm actually going to do is change it. I'm going to have the Trent VOR on my side. So let's put 115.7. 115.7. There it is. Now remember, you can skip all of this and just fly it using the GPS if you would like. And we also don't need to tune it because we could, well, we do actually, but we could fly ourselves directly to Trent just using the inertial navigation system without even tuning it. But that's not really the intention. Next, I'm going to set the course bar up. 340 degrees is what we're going to try and intercept. So let's set 340 on here. Oh, wrong way around. Got to get it the right way around. And it's quite handy. It's displayed on the top right, your actual what course you've got selected. So 340. Good. So now we take off. When I see 1 mile on here, which is going to happen straight away, we make a right turn. I can track 298 degrees. Now, how do you track 298 degrees? Well, you'd fly and account for the winds, but also I have this handy little box here which is going to show me my track. And then once I get to 12 miles, I should make a nice gentle right turn and intercept this course bar, 340 degrees, up towards the Trent VOR, and we're going to stop at 6,000 feet. The flight directors are going to be off for this. Once we're in the air, I'll engage the autopilot and show you how to use that. And that's pretty much it. We've got the QNH set. We've got a brief for how we're going to do that. Next it's going to be, we've done the aircraft, we've done the pre-flight. Let's just check we have the right amount of fuel. So I want about 2.7 tons in each tank. It does say it's finished. If I go over here, I can see the fuel. 2.7 tons. Each one is just over 5,000 pounds. So that's about right. So you've got 3 tanks here, and it's shown. Remember, we're going to let these be automatically run by our flight engineer. So I'm going to get the flight engineer going on the before start checklist now, because I think we're pretty much ready to go. In the takeoff tab, I can now enter the runway 27, because enter the weather, which is 255 at 23, and we're going to do a flap 15 takeoff. And you can see here that it calculates the necessary speeds for us and the takeoff EPR. Engineers just running some last tests. There's a stick shaker test. So, handy feature here, I can just, if I get rid of this for a second, I can just select set speeds, and it moves the bugs for us. So we're going to rotate 125 knots, climb away at 127 up to 127, up to 137, 140 knots. Good. Our takeoff EPR is 2.11, and so I'm going to tell it to set that, and also takeoff trim is 4.75. So you can see here the trim's actually set to 0. If I set EPR and trim, 4.75 is automatically set, and the takeoff EPR 2.11, and you can see the little white triangles over there have just gone to the 2.11. So we're now getting ready to go. We've got our systems set as we would like them to be, and that is our takeoff performance done basically, which is really handy. So you can just click on this little box, get it to go away, bring up the phone again, let's just see where we are. So it's still running through the before start checklist. This is a long checklist. Let's just see what we need to remove outside, because we're going to just taxi off stand. So I'm actually going to get rid of the ground power and the chocks myself. So let's just go into our clipboards, aircraft, goodbye chocks, goodbye cones, goodbye ground power. Airplane's running on its APU power. Right, before start is done, the next is the after start checklist. So we just literally need to start the engines. How handy is this? You know, it's just brilliant. Airplane is ready to go. You're going to hear the sounds now. So let's fire up the engines. I believe we start engine 3 first. Let me just check that. Yes, so start sequence is engine 3, then 1, then 2. So to start engine 3, we come up on the overhead panel. By the way, you can see lots of different parts up here. Pretty standard stuff, so the hydraulic power and so on. You're just going to leave these all on. But what we're going to do is put the engine starter of engine number 3 to ground. Oh. If I can get the mouse there, there we go. Ground. That now, because the flight engineer has already set up our air and so on to provide air where we want it for the engine start. So you can see now, N2 down here is rising. Once it passes 20%, I'm going to introduce fuel to the number 3 engine. So there we go, engine number 3 now up and running on the right hand side of the airplane there. Very simple now. Just repeat the process for starting engine number 1 and 2. So that's centered, so we'll close the guard, ground on engine number 1, and then once N2 reaches 20%, introduce fuel. Now the reason we can't actually start engine 1 and 2 until the tow bar is disconnected, I believe this is because it would pressurize the nose wheel steering, but there we go. And now the engine lights up, we get an exhaust temperature, all looking good. Airplane is coming to life. You can see the beacons on, all the lights and so on being handled by our engineer as well, which is just, again, absolutely brilliant idea, really like it. Because you still feel like you're involved in the procedures, even if it's you know, and you can go further if you want to, but it's totally manageable amount of workload. Right, next step, that's done. Number 3, grounds. This is the one in the tail. And you can see down here our little oil low pressures and so on lights going out. All the systems all talking to each other nicely. And there's 20% now. Fuel. Pretty standard stuff, really. By the way, our autopilot control panel is down here. We'll be talking about that in flight. We talked about our communications. Parking brake is set with that light on. And this is our flight control indications over here. This little dial. Got air temperature outside, which is good. Radio altimeter over here. And backup altimeter down here. Yeah, pretty straightforward, really, once you get the hang of it. And then, like I say, this is all taken care of, thankfully. Good, so that's the engine started. I'm going to set the flaps to what I want, which is, and you can check that in your little EFB, what you had. Just going to set the trim again because I've moved it a little bit, and the flaps were 15. So let's set the flaps to 15. I think that's 15 there. Yep, 15. And run the after start checklists. So this is where the engineer will now turn off things like the APU and so on. Let's see if we can see anything going on the panel. There you go, there's the generators. So these generators are now being synchronized and then moved across. The APU is now not being used, which means we get the amber light showing the electrical circuit on the APU is no longer in use. That's the fuel systems all coming online. Basically all the lights going out now, which is a good sign. These lights up here, what have we got? We've got the window heat and then we have the pitot heat, so they are off for now because that'll be done a bit later. Now, it sounds like they run the stick shaker again now. I don't know why, but anyway. To taxi out, pretty straightforward. We're going to make a right turn here and head round down and take off runway 27. There's the flight directors being tested. After start checklist is complete, let's take the taxi and the runway turn-off lights. There you go, those are on. And we're going to do a big left turn around. It's the only way to get out of here with all these people around us. But look at that, pretty cool. Also on Boeings, you do your flight control checks before you taxi, so let's just do those. So, I love the fact it has an inboard aileron, which is a very long-haul airplane thing to have, but there we go. So they work fine. Rudder and elevator, all looking good. And like I say, you can actually see that in the flight deck, because we have our little indicator here, which, oh, it doesn't show us the ailerons, funny, but it shows us the elevator and the rudder. Right, release the parking brake. A little bit of thrust. Some really nice sounds. Get the airplane moving. And the only way around past this truck is to go left, so we'll do that. Don't worry about the people, I'm sure they'll all move out the way. Now this isn't, you know, this is the sort of thing the 727 would have been doing, is taxiing around under its own steam. Yeah, you wouldn't have people standing quite that close under the wing. There we go. Gorgeous. Really nice lighting on this model as well. And they've done a fantastic job with this nose tyre. It's a particularly nice piece of modelling. I really like it. Good. So now we can run the taxi procedure. This is just things like, I believe this will turn on some of the heaters and so on. We'll see what actually happens. There you go, yeah, so this brings on the piezo heats online and the APU. Oh, that's the APU being shut off. There you go. Now, it does run away, this airplane. Don't have too much thrust on for the taxi out. That's the taxi procedure done. So we just need to make sure we are ready for our takeoff. So let's just slow it down a bit. Now, here's something handy. You know, I often talk about ground speeds when taxiing around airliners. You know, we don't do sharp turns over 10 knots. You won't go in at even up to 30 knots in a straight line is about as fast as you'd probably go. How do you tell when you're in an airplane like this? Well, if you set your little INS to ground speed, you can see here 13, because we're on track GS. So that's my track, 89.3. So basically east, isn't it? Which we know we are, because this is an east-west runway. So we're currently facing east. We're going to take off facing west. If I look on my map, you can see it's there. There we go, facing east, taxiing down the runway, or the, you know, next to the runway. And over here is our ground speed, 18 knots, 90 knots and accelerating. So let's just bring the throttle back to idle, and the airplane will roll us down. Good. Next is the before takeoff procedure. Let's just refresh our memory of our departure. So takeoff, when I see 1 mile on here, I can make a gentle right turn, track 298 degrees, level off at 6,000 feet, and then we can fly out to here and take heading 340 up towards the Trent VOR. Pretty straightforward, he says, so we'll see how it goes. The takeoff, we're going to set the EPRs to the white bug and then let the airplane accelerate and accelerate and accelerate. We'll get V1 and rotate at about 125. We'll rotate the airplane and then climb away at just above our white bug up to about 140 knots. So we'll just pitch to maintain that. At 1,000 feet, I'll lower the nose and then we can accelerate and retract the flaps. Good stuff. Right, that feels pretty fast. Oh, that's the reverses. Don't want to do that. 29 knots, yeah. So just a dab of the brakes, and you see that ground speed number just dropping back down 20 knots. There we go. Right, now we're coming up to the runway and approaching it, so let's run the before takeoff procedure. This will do things like get all the landing lights on, the strobe lights on, and so on. Let's clear out on the approach, clear out on the runway. Still a bit fast, we're doing 15 knots, yeah, that's a bit much, let's slow it down. Under 10 knots, okay, good. Like I say, it does run away a little bit, it's not the heaviest airplane in the world, it does have 3 engines. However, you'll see on takeoff, it doesn't accelerate particularly quickly. Nice long runway today though, so that's not going to be an issue for us. And you can see now, all the lights are on, strobe lights flashing on the wingtips, excellent stuff. Okay, so let's get rid of our little phone. Get ourselves lined up. Now I am, as ever, using an Xbox controller for this, so please do bear with me. So I'm holding on the toe brakes. I'm just going to apply a little bit of thrusts. Now I'm going to release the toe brakes. Boeing don't tend to use them. Get the engine stabilised. And I say Boeing don't tend to use the toe brakes for the thrust setting, but I don't know what they did for this aircraft. There it is, and now let's just drive it forward to those white bugs. So set takeoff thrust, we need it set by 80 knots really. Even that could be a bit late. Now it's going to sit just below that, especially at the start of the takeoff roll. So there we go, that is the thrust set. Keeping it straight with the rudder. Actually, I take it back, the acceleration is very good. There's the rotate, rotating gently, 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 releasing that rudder, letting it weathercock. Getting a bit fast. Gear up. And look at all that power, so actually bring it up to about 20 degrees. Getting that speed back, there we go. Okay, it should be about 17 degrees initially, I believe. But yeah, it is a, it can climb very fast. So there you go, sitting just below 20. We just got a bit fast there initially. Right, shortly we will pass 1 mile. There's 1,000 feet, so lowering the nose. 1 mile just coming up on the DME now. Bringing the thrust back to 1.7, which is our initial climb EPR. Look at that, we're at 2,400 feet. It is an absolute rocket. Making our right turn now to track. We wanted to track 328, I think. Oops, lost the chart. That's disappointing. This is why so much going on. 298. We're going to track 298 degrees. So 298 down here. It's about 300. So I'm looking for 300 on the compass. We're accelerating, bringing the flaps up a stage to 5. There's about 300. And down here, I can see that I'm actually tracking 298 now. So I don't want to go any more left. Sorry, any more right. A little bit of nose down trim as we accelerate. Still trying to climb up to, remember, 6,000 feet initially. Bring in the next stage of flaps, the flaps 2. And what I'm going to do is go down here. I'm going to arm outsell. Oh, I can't do that yet without the autopilot in. Okay, good. So we'll climb it up initially ourselves. So we're going to do this until we get to 12 miles from Trent. You can see there we're tracking along that line. So I'm now looking here once this counts down to 12. But basically I'm going to intercept this course bar up towards the Trent VOR. Keep tracking 300, which is what we're doing, or 298, a little bit left. Need to accelerate a bit faster than this, so let's trim nose down, get the nose down. I have to say, this is one of the nicest flying aircrafts I've had in Microsoft Flight Simulator so far. I am really, really impressed with how stable it feels, and it was noticeable even on the takeoff roll. Let's bring the flaps up now. Even on the takeoff roll, you could feel that the rudder was not oversensitive, which is unusual in Microsoft Flight Simulator. 1,000 feet to go to our level off. Getting the trim in, starting to bring the thrust back now. Last 500 feet. Here's our course bar coming in, so I'm going to start a gentle right turn. Actually, it says about 12, so let's get a bit closer. Now we're still accelerating. Get the nose down, power back. There's our level off at 6,000 feet. Now this is a little bit tricky to judge because you're doing the thrust and the flying yourself, but that's what you need to do. So you can see here 6,000 feet and a vertical speed I want about 0. So just get that nose down. Don't want to go above 250 knots, so bring the thrust back a little bit. Just trying to stabilize everything out. About there. Good. So now there's our course bar's gone through, by the way, so it's time to make that right turn. We need to intercept it. So that 12 miles didn't quite work out for us. We've shot through slightly. There it is, 12. A bit late, but there we go. So keep the nose up. Remember, you are flying. Don't want to sink too low. Don't want to sink any lower. There we go. Normally, you wouldn't have to do this with an Xbox controller. You'd have your hands on the controls, but there we go. 6,000 feet. Keep the right turn going. And I'm going to just turn onto that heading bug of north, really, and intercept that course bar up towards Trent. Now it is quite unstable in pitch. You do need to get it trimmed out or you're going to make your life very difficult like I am here. So let's get it sorted. Okay, so you can see the bar is off to the right, so I need to fly to the right to intercept it. Now let's get the autopilot in, and that's going to really help us out. You can simply, I've got it in vertical speed mode, which is fine, and I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to move over to the right and put it into nav lock. Now it's in nav lock, it will automatically fly this course bar for me. Need a bit more thrust to maintain the speed. And I'm going to move the heading by ground, just to point where we're going. And you can see that it's in vertical speed mode. So it's just holding the whatever vertical speed I had, which was about 0, but I want to be at 6,000 feet. And I've got 6,000 feet in the window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arm outcell, and it arms, and then in vertical speed I'm going to climb. And what the airplane will do is it will climb, and then it will capture the altitude, because I armed outcell, which is why we have the alt select up here. So that's the autopilot's a bit of a funny one. And then it goes green, you see? So you have to tell it you want to level off there, just like you used to have to do on the Dash 8 I used to fly. Which I'm not a fan of that system, but that's how it is. It's no longer that way on most commercial aircraft these days. And you can see here, we're at 6,000 feet, coming up to the Trent VOR. Pretty simple, right? Next, we're going to go up to the Pole Hill VOR. So, if we look at our route, Pole Hill, up here. Pole Hill is a frequency of 112.1. So, I'm going to tune 1121. Ready to go in the backup. So we're passing over our current waypoint, so I'm going to put it into heading cell. Then I'm going to swap the VOR over to Pole Hill. Then I can just adjust the course towards it. There we go. And then put it back into nav lock, and it will fly us now 51 miles towards Pole Hill, doing 250 knots. Good, so there you go. We are now using our radio navigation to fly towards Pole Hill. Let's climb up. Let's climb up to, let's say our cruise is going to be 17,000 feet. So I put 17,000 feet in the window. 17. And then I'm going to put it into IS hold, because we're at over 250 knots. So I put IS hold. So now the airplane will pitch to try and maintain the airspeed it's currently at. So if I add power, we'll add the thrusts up to our climb thrusts. And you can see there, remember we have the auto updating. So the airplane is automatically bringing in the automatically just adjusting these targets. You'd have to do it manually otherwise, but there we go. So I can actually bring the thrust all the way up to 1.8 EPR, and the airplane will have to climb. So here comes the vertical speed. Oh, it's in out mode. No, so I need to press outcell, and then it's in IS hold, and now it can climb. So that's an important distinction there for me to learn. You have to have got rid of outcell, otherwise it will just stay in the out hold mode and accelerate. And now it's climbing at pretty fast, actually, 300 plus knots. This is a very fast climb. A bit fast below 10,000 feet, but it will pretend air traffic control let us. And there we go, look at the smoke coming out the back of it. Love that. Now that's actually a pretty gentle climb because of the speed we're going. I don't need to fly that fast. So let's say I want to adjust it. What I can do is I can just set the vertical speed and then increase it. And now the airplane will pitch up and the speed will wash off. If we keep it at 4,000 feet a minute, although it might manage. This is I'm surprised how powerful this airplane is. I'm quite impressed. But there we go. Now you can see that our INS actually is showing we're doing 355 knots over the ground, and I can spin it round to show us the current winds. 273.43, but it is still going from waypoint 0 to 1. Now I want to go from waypoint 1 to 2. I'm not sure what it's complaining about. Any warning lights? Are we pressurizing? No, we are not pressurizing. There we go. That's that warning is, I suppose. Still tracking up towards the Pole Hill VOR. See if I can get rid of that warning for you. Okay, well I think I've solved that horn. Yeah, it was the cabin altitude. So, of course, in real life, if you had a cabin altitude alarm, I didn't know what it sounded like on this airplane until then, but if you did have one in the real aircraft, we are trained to do an immediate descent, so we'll do our memory items for that. What happened here is because I didn't get through to the after takeoff procedure on the phone, I think it didn't swap the pressurization system, which is over here, into the flight mode, and therefore it didn't pressurize properly, so we had a cabin altitude had gone above 10,000 feet, so I think that's what happened there. The airplane climbed very quickly and I was very busy, so you can see how handy this is. You do need to use it, of course, but if you do, it takes away a lot of the strain, because trying to hand fly this airplane and do all those systems is just, it's relatively impractical. Anyway, what I've done is, just while I was sorting that out, I've just put us into a bit of a return pattern. So we are now currently sort of flying back down our track again. So momentarily, if I bring us up on the map, there we are. So we'll turn back around and carry on up towards Pole Hill. Now, something that's happened is our INS has stayed on the waypoint from 0 to 1. It's not actually navigating from 1 to 2, so it's still flying from East Midlands to Trent. And you can see that if I put distance time, it thinks we're 30 miles away, 4.6, 4.5 minutes time from the Trent VOR, because we're now pointing towards it, so it's counting down. But that's actually not what I want to do. I want it to fly from Trent to Pole Hill, so waypoint 1 to waypoint 2. To do that, I need to go waypoint change, and then I do 1 to 2 insert. And now it's flying from waypoint 1, Trent, to Pole Hill, and all its numbers will update accordingly. So that's good news. Next, what I want to do is turn the airplane back around. We'll re-intercept our course over towards the Pole Hill VOR, and then I'll show you how you can use the INS to do that. So if I put it on an intercept sort of heading, around we go. Also, of course, we need to set standards, so we're on QNH 1013, and now we can carry on our climb. Now, as I say, you would have descended if you had a cabin altitude alarm. I just didn't know that's what that alarm was on this airplane. So now I'm going to carry on the climb up to 17,000. Out select is armed. I'm in VS mode, and I just wind that up. The airplane will begin a climb, and then very shortly that will capture into green out hold at 170, which will be our cruise for today. There we go. It's gone into out and heading mode, as you can see, but I want to intercept this bar, so I'm actually going to swap it over. Instead of heading mode, I can swap it over to nav lock, and it will now, it's going to have to do it quite aggressively because we're a little bit slow there, but it will now turn the nose around and intercept that. Now you can see it says 16,000 out, but if I adjust the QNH slightly, you'll see we're actually at 17,000. It's just a bit of a problem with this style of altimeter where it can end up showing you that number. So if I put it back to 1013, it looks like it's 16,000. It's not actually. Quite confusing. Good. And now, if we look down on our INS, now it's going the correct waypoints. It's going from 1 to 2, so we're 3.7 minutes away, 23 nautical miles from the next waypoint. And if I look at my DME, we're 27 nautical miles away from the next waypoint. Now there's a difference there, and you're thinking, well, why are they different? That's because, of course, we are actually at an altitude, so we'll never reach 0 miles from the Pole Hill VOR, because we'll be 3 miles above it, which explains the difference between these two numbers, because this is just based on a point over the ground. It's not actually the distance to the VOR itself. Good. So airplane's navigating. So how do I get the airplane to just navigate using this to this next waypoint? Well, that's quite easy as well. What I can do is, I'm in nav mode up here. Remember, if you set GPS, you could have it just follow the GPS track, but we're in nav mode, and then I go down here and I go to aux nav, and now it's in aux nav. It's no longer following this. I can prove that if I adjust the course bar, it won't follow it. It is now going to follow the INS, and it's just trying to fly from waypoint 1 to waypoint 2, so it's flying me towards the Pole Hill VOR using the INS. So that's it. So that's how you can navigate this airplane across the ocean. Now, like I say, if you had your GPS set up here, you could set GPS and then go to aux nav, and you could have the airplane just fly you along the magenta line in your GPS. Pretty handy, pretty handy. Good. So let's just put our course bar back, just so we're monitoring ourselves. Now remember, you might think, well, we're not pointing straight at the VOR, so how does this work? Because our course bar's off to the right. But if I go down into the INS, I can see that we actually have a wind. 270, 62 knots. It's windy today. So that is a wind coming from here, pushing us that way. So the nose of the airplane is having to point further left to track towards the waypoint we've entered, which is doing very well. So we are currently 12 miles away, 2 minutes. Good. So we're now using the INS to pass Pole Hill, which we'll do shortly, and then it should turn us towards our last waypoint, Nateb. From Nateb we will fly an instrument approach into Newcastle. Now we'll talk about that momentarily. Whilst we have a moment here, let's just take a look around the flight deck. And I've got to say, my comments for the texturing on the outside of the aeroplane do not apply to the interior. The interior is fantastic. Look at this glare shield, worn out where hands have been rested. All the little bits of trim and wire fitted around the window panes look absolutely brilliant. There is just so many great angles in the flight deck. And even as you step out into here on this control panel, you know, look, bits of paint missing down to the rust proofing. Absolutely love it. It's really, really nicely done. And there is no part of this flight deck where that doesn't apply. It all looks really good. Look at even the pedals have got mud worn away from the bottom. They put a huge amount of effort into texturing in this flight deck, and it shows and it pays off. This is a very, very nice place to sit. There we go, waypoint 2 to 3, so it has sequenced correctly this time. And now the airplane is turning itself away from Pole Hill and towards Nateb. And there you go, we've just gone through the top of the VOR, showing it 3 miles because it's 3 miles beneath us. So we're now pointing away. Go track somewhere there, I suppose. Yeah, so there's no way to navigate straight towards the waypoint Nateb. It's just a point in space. It doesn't have any actual radio frequency for us to tune, and we're flying on here. So I can navigate away from Pole Hill on radio nav 8 and then pick up the radio nav 8 at the airport, or like we are doing, we can use the inertial navigation system. Now let's go to Newcastle. And we'll go to the approach charts, because what we're going to do is fly an approach onto runway 27. It's a strong westerly breeze today, so this is what we're going to fly. Now, you can see here, Nateb actually sits just left of the Newcastle NDB. So the Newcastle NDB 352 is what's used to fly this procedure, an NDB procedure, NDB ILS DME for runway 25. So what I'm going to do is tune the Newcastle NDB, we'll fly towards the NDB, then we'll make a right turn and follow this procedure. So we'll fly out from the NDB, then back round and join the ILS. This is how we would do it if air traffic weren't telling us headings and interceptions and so on. And it's how you do it if we can't fly an RNAV procedure. So for example, this RNP procedure we cannot fly because we can't put these waypoints in without the coordinates up, SUPIG and so on. This is for modern airplanes, but we can fly this NDB ILS DME. This is a very traditional airplane. So let's tune it up correctly. Let's just check we're cruising at a good speed. Yep, we are. Okay, let's tune Newcastle. So that is an NDB, course 352. Now, fun fact about NDBs is they are actually getting less and less common. They are very rare these days, and a lot of airplanes don't have them fitted. The Boeing 787 doesn't always have NDBs available. You can't actually have it on some 787s out there. Right, 352 is the Newcastle NDB, and let's just put it on both sides because there's not another NDB in the area we want to use, because there's barely any anyway. Remember, when you tune these things, make sure you put the little dot above the one you're going to use. 352, 352. Good stuff. Right, so now we need to display it. It won't display on our horizontal situation indicator here. This is for VORs and the compass. It will actually display over here. Now these are both tuned to the VOR, so you can see that it's needle number 1 is pointing back to the Pole Hill VOR. So if I swap that to ADF, it's now going to show us, it will point in the direction of the ADF number 1, 352, November Tango, which we've tuned. As we get closer, we're too far though. NDBs are pretty weak. We're out of range of it at the moment. We're currently 20 miles away from Pole Hill behind us. What I can do is actually, if I set distance time, I can see we're 9 minutes and 61 miles away from the Nateb waypoint, which is right next to the November Tango. So it's time really to begin our descent. So let's just start slowing down a little bit. Just going to bring the power off. And we'll just briefly talk about how we're going to fly this procedure. So we'll fly here, and then I'm going to set it into heading mode and fly outbound 086. Next, I need to see at 8.4 miles from the India November Whiskey Charlie, which is the ILS DME. So once we're at 8.4 miles from the DME, I'll make my left turn round and inset the ILS back in. I can leave the hold at 3,500 feet, but then I will descend to 2,000 and then inset from there. So all we need to tune now is the ILS 111.5 course of 246. So let's tune that. 111.5 and select it, because remember we are flying, I'm not using the Pole Hill VOR, I have it displayed, but I'm actually flying in AUX mode, so I'm letting the INS navigate for me. and we'll set 111.5 on the other side as well. And now the DME, both DMEs will actually show me that India November Whiskey Charlie DME, so I can see when I'm 8.4 miles out. Finally, set the inbound course 246. So course 246, we need that on both sides. (246). 246. That's set. Good. So pretty straightforward. We head out from the NDB 086, and remember I can actually see my track down using this if I go to ground speed track, and it will give me a clue. But we shouldn't need to, because we can actually track using the needle over here, which will show us that we're whether in the right place or not. Remember, I have a tutorial on how to track needles available, but we'll be doing it in today's video. Right, speeds come back. Let's begin our descent. To do that, I'm going to put in the altitude. So first of all, we can descend down to, I don't know why it keeps doing that, to 3,500 feet at the NDB, which is above the MSA of 3,400. I'm going to put 3,500 feet in the window. So 3,000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3,500 feet. So there we go. Next, I'm going to force the airplane out of out hold, and I'm going to arm by pressing outsail. I've armed now 3,500 feet. And finally, for vertical mode, I'm going to put IS hold. It's at 250 knots. And now if I bring the thrust all the way back, what will happen is the airplane tries to hold 250 knots. The only way to do that is to actually lower the nose. And now we are descending towards that hold. Sorry, towards the NATEB waypoint. Once I can see the NDB is in range, I can fly towards the NDB. But for now, we are just using that INS to navigate us towards the waypoint. We're 44 miles away. We're actually pretty good for distance. So nice gentle 250 knot descent. We'll see us good. Interesting note is that to use the speed brake, you have to use it all or none of it. You can't use partial increments, as far as I can tell, which is not the case on most modern aircraft. Right, we're descending to an altitude, so I'll set the QNH, which up here is a bit lower at 1,000 hectopascals. 250 knots looking good. Got an inbound course, and now we're just waiting for that NDB to come into life. Like I say, 41 miles, we've got a bit of a way to go. It's going to take us about 7 minutes to get there, which isn't too long really, so we do need to keep the descent going. And we'll come up, we are currently flying north, so we'll look something like this. We'll be going up here, and then we'll head outbound. Now, we're actually going towards NATEB, so we're actually coming up to a waypoint about here, over the airfield. So we can go towards NATEB, then make our right turn to the NDB, and then head outbound. If you weren't going to do that, it gets complicated because you'd have to fly an arrival into the hold. So you'd fly up here, this way in the hold, this way, and then back to the NDB. Then you can fly the hold. But then you'd have to use the alternate procedure, which is here, extend the outbound leg of the hold, descend to 2,000 feet. It's a whole thing. I don't want to get too bogged down with it. But what you'd basically do is enter the hold, and then you can fly the alternate procedure, which means you just extend downwind and turn in. But we're going to come in like this and just fly the procedure as it's shown, which will be really handy because it will show up on the chart for you guys. Right, NDB has come to life. There we go. Look, this arrow is pointing towards the November Tango. So once it's a bit of a shallower angle, I can just point straight towards it, and that will work nicely. Still 35 miles away, but only 6 minutes. Amazing, eh? Currently at 11,000 feet, so coming through 10, I'm going to put the lights on. In fact, probably we can just run the approach checklist now. Approach procedure. I think that would do things like get the lights on. There you go. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Love this system. Next is a landing procedure. Good stuff. I think that would do things like arm the speed brakes and so on. So through 10,000 feet, we're already back at 250 knots. Nice. This is a relatively efficient descent. Beautiful machine, isn't it? I love the rotating beacon. Really nicely modelled. Yeah, here you go. Here's that external texturing. Just lacking a little bit compared to what's inside. I don't know why. It's hard to put my finger on it, but that's just my experience of it. I did buy this airplane with my own money, so these are all my own opinions. I don't think that's a serious detraction from it, though. You can see it, we're almost at idle thrust, and it is just gently, it does give us a warning when we go idle, I think because the gear isn't down, so yeah, I'm just going to keep it slightly off idle. but there we go. But yeah, pretty efficient airplane, 2,000 feet per minute. The 787, if you try to descend at idle thrust at 250 knots, the Boeing 787 will barely do 1,000 feet per minute. It just glides forever. It shows you the difference in wings and aerodynamic design that they've got these days. Right, there you go. The DME has now come in, so our ILS is starting to pick up its receiver. So we've got 30 miles to run to the airport. So this is all starting to make sense. 7,000 feet, all good. We're all good on the height, and we can slow down once we get there. We'll have plenty of room to do that. Might even, if I trickle on the power now, remember I'm using the mode of IS hold, so the airplane is just going to simply pitch according to keeping the speed it last had, which is 250 knots. So if I add thrust, it will actually have to raise the nose slightly. Can't believe there's no auto thrust at all, but that does seem to be the case. Love the flight deck. The texturing is just so good. It is really great. I love this glare shield. The glare shield is one of the things you look at the most in an aeroplane, and especially in Flight Simulator. I think it makes a massive difference to have a really nice looking glare shield or a realistic one, because you're going to see it all the time. Look at that. Wind turbines spinning around really fast. It is very breezy. I've never seen a wind turbine spin that quickly, but yeah, it's breezy on the ground. Strong westerly winds. Coming through 6,000 feet. 20 miles to go, so then that's a waypoint, 4 minutes. So actually, we're now getting a bit low. So what I can do now is go to vertical speeds and just wind it right back, add a bit of power. Yeah, my efficient descent is now no longer so efficient. Get the thrust on. Very quiet engines on the flight deck. It's a very noisy airplane, the 727. You actually had to have to let it fly in America after, I think it was the late 90s, they had to install hush kits that quietened it down. These engines are famously noisy, but for the pilots, the 727 is quite a long machine, and we're actually sitting right at the front, so we can't hear those engines change power very well. It's surprisingly disconcerting, even just using the simulator for me, because even in this Boeing 787 I get a slightly better sense of what the engines are doing. Here, there's just no noise at all from them, they're just right there at the back. Right, we're doing a very slow descent now. 3 minutes to go, 15 miles. Keep the speed at 250. That's good, nice and stable. If we look at the charts, are we on here yet? Not showing up yet. If I look at the, oh, we won't fill it with, but yeah, like I say, we're probably somewhere here, pointing up towards NATEB, and then we'll just go in and out. Something we must do is set up the approach speed. So we'll bring up the chart. And now we go to our landing tab, and in here I can put in the conditions. So we do a flat 30 landing. It's just taking the current winds, but yeah, westerly winds, and it needs 1,400 meters. That'll be no trouble. Most importantly, I can set the speeds. So VREF at 125, VAP at 130. So we'll approach. It's a bit breezy today, so we'll approach around about 130 to 140 knots. So just within this area here above the white bug, and there we go. Great. You can also, as you can see, you can enter your Navigraph in and have the charts in here as well if you fancy. So accelerate it a little bit, bring the thrust back. 1.6 minutes to go, 8 miles, so we're pretty much there. It's time now to think about heading towards our NDB. So let's slow down, let's come back to 200 knots. And we're now just passing 4,900 feet, so let's keep the descent going. A little dial, so that dial down for, oh sorry, you've got descend and increase. Let's also update the heading bug. The heading bug's updated. Now if you can't change your heading bug, it'll be because you need to go over here and put it into the turn knob, and then I can engage heading cell. There we go, turn knob, heading cell is engaged, and now it's just following the heading bug, and I can steer the airplane like that. Let's bring the thrust back a bit more. Remember, we can be 3,500 feet as we leave the hold. NDB is up on the right, 4 miles away, 1,000 feet to go to our altitude, and on the chart you'll see us very shortly. We'll be coming in here. There we go. Oh, let's not close it. Please don't close. Oh, it's closed completely. That's not what I wanted. There we go, there's our NDB ILS chart. Good. So thrust back now. And let's just engage those speed brakes for a bit. There we go. Slow the airplane right down. And now let's point the heading bug at the NDB. I'm just going to turn off the second VOR because it's just distracting. So they're both pointing now at the NDB, which is over at 040. So if I put that to 040. It's first stage of flaps. We'll go to flaps 1. And that's the warning. Let's get a bit of thrust on. And we'll go to flaps 2. Sorry, flaps 5. Heading. About to level off. It's leveling off at 3,500, so get the thrust on. Remember, you have to do that. Don't want to get any slower now. Still pointing towards the NDB. And remember, we're going to go outbound. A bit more thrust needed. Thrust, thrust, thrust. Ah, now I can hear the engines. And we're now going to go outbound on 086. So I'm looking to see 086 on my course. Oh, not there. Sorry, my heading. Let's turn right. 086 is about there. And then I should see the tail of the NDB on the 086. Now I'm just going to slow it down a bit. Speed's coming back. Let's not get it too far. So 086, remember, we're currently on 076. We need to get right. The wind's blowing us through. So we're just slightly inside, which means when we turn, we could find ourselves, yeah, we're in this one. So we could end up turning short. I flew this earlier, and I didn't have this trouble with this warning. I wish I knew what it was. So now our tail is on 080, coming around to 086. Let's drop the next stage of flap and slow down a bit. And remember, we're going down to 8.6 on the DME, 8.4 on the DME, and then we'll turn around and inset the ILS. So let's come back to 160 knots. We're at flap 15. Let's go to flaps 20. I'm really sorry about that horn. I don't know what's doing it. Let's drop the gear. There's our 10 miles, so we've gone a bit fast, so we can now turn around and intercept the ILS. Heading back round onto a sort of intercept heading. And of course, when we left the hole, we should have descended to 2,000 feet. So let's get the descent going. It will be high, so 2,000. And then we're in vertical speeds. So I can remove the outsail and arm it, and then put the airplane into a descent. Because we are now out here, making the turn, and we are descending to 2,000 feet, which is the platform altitude. Don't need to descend quite that quickly, to be fair. Right, that's in. We're doing 160 knots, so that's all good. Turning around to intercept, so what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to move this switch to Auto GS. Now, we don't need the gear there. I was just hoping that would silence that caution, but it has failed to do so, so I can only apologise. What if I run the landing checklist? That will help things. Or landing procedure. So now the airplane will fly on that heading, and it will automatically swap over. You see it's in heading mode. 160 knots. Keep the thrust on, don't want to get any slower. And it will fly on that heading mode until it intercepts that localizer. So we're now pointing inbound, descending to 2,000 feet. We're 11 miles out, so 2,000 is a little bit low. But you'll see this is quite a short procedure. And you'll see here, VOR lock, there you go, out, so it's going to level off now, so get the thrust on so we don't get slow. And it's a draggy airplane with the gear and flaps out. And it's turning round, so we can update the heading bug to point down, so it's intercepted the localizer nicely. And now the glide slope sitting here above us. Landing procedure's done, I just need to put the last stage of flap out. I'm so sorry about that alarm. That is so frustrating. I didn't have this earlier. I wonder what I've missed. Right. It could be that the speed brake is out of its D10. It is! The speed brakes are out. There we go. Genius. Right, let's get the thrust back, because we did need a lot of power there. That explains a lot. That's why having hardware makes a big difference. Good. So, thrust back now. Let's come back. Let's get our last flap out. We are at flap 30. Ah, so by pressing landing, it looks like it did configure us. Maybe I did that in all that messing around, but there we go. So we can now start reducing our speed back to, like I say, about 135 knots. Very good. That shows that the caution warning systems are working on this machine. I like it. So we've done the landing checks. We'll get rid of the phone now. 140 knots there. And very shortly, the glide slope is armed, as you can see here, and it should drop the nose. So I'm going to leave the power where it is because the speed's reducing, but we will... There you go. Out select is now armed for the go-arounds. And now bring the throttle back a bit. And just keep an eye on that speed. So the airplane should now trim itself out. And like I say, we'll keep about 130 to 135 if we can. So we'll just fine-tune that now. Now the speed brake is out. Let's just arm the ground spoilers. What I might do is just run the landing procedure again to make sure that it does arm them. A bit more power needed. There we go. So let's just check. The gear is down. The flaps are at landing flap of 30. The ground spoilers are armed. And yeah, I think that's it. Oh yeah, we can also set an auto brake if we want. Although I don't think we're going to need it today because the wind is so strong. But let's put it to minimum because it is, yeah, it is a strong headwinds. You can see the autoflight system doing its best. You can use the autopilot below 1,000 feet if you're coupled onto an ILS like this. Look at that, it's amazing. They've done a great job with this, I love it. See all the controls working in the wind. Awesome. Power back a bit. So next step is to land. So about 30 feet, we'll flare, we'll bring the thrust levers to idle, like lots of airplanes. It does float a little bit, it gets quite a lot of ground effects. That wing is low to the ground, so as you get down, it's quite a big, low wing, and it does seem to get a bit of a lift off the ground, so we'll be aware of that. And then let's settle onto the runway, get the reversers out, and gently lower the nose down. What a beauty. Speed sitting stable, so I'm going to leave the thrust as it is. So what's that worked out at? About 1.29 EPR? EPR is such a hard digit to use, I find. I much prefer using N1, which is about, what's that, 60, 68%, something like that. It's getting a little bit faster now. Just take a tiny edge off the thrust. And it's time to land. So, should be relatively within trim. You can see how the airspeed is wobbling up and down. Love it. Autopilot out. Stop the horn. And now just don't do too much. It should be in trim. If it isn't, then you'll obviously need to retrim a little bit. But we're keeping about 600 feet per minute. That's good. A little bit fast now. Power off. Or power back, I should say. Just keeping us on that profile. Wind from the right. Keeping 600 feet per minute. Driving us down. Too fast, so power off again, power back. Still a bit fast, powering back a little bit. 30 flare, idle. Oh, come on. There's touchdown, onto the reverse. Oh, that's a shame. They're a bit wobbly there. That was quite hard to do with the Xbox controller, I must confess, but that is my excuse anyway. And that's it, reverses are out. Not too happy with my first attempt landing there. I'm still with the Xbox controller, but let's see if we can do something a bit better. It is incredibly breezy. You can see our vertical speed is so low. It's only 600 feet per minute. So yeah, it's a strong headwind here today. So let's just get the power settled and let the airplane be trimmed out, because we were slowly accelerating on that last one. I think as well I brought the camera back a bit much. Wind is from the right. Let's get the thrust sorted. Okay, looking pretty stable there. So autopilot out. Disconnecting. Keeping that vertical speed. Just going a little bit nose down the trim. There we go. Okay. Power back a little bit more. Keeping the vertical speed. Don't shallow out. Power back a bit more. It does seem to just run away at the end here. Must be something I'm doing wrong. Come on. Too fast. Because what happens is it just ends up floating down the whole runway then. There we go. That's looking a bit better.
50,
Bit of
40,
sink.
30, 20.
Idle. Gentle left rudder. Hold the flare. There's touchdown. Get the reversers out, keeping it straight to the rudder. Now that's more like it. Letting that nose settle on the runway. Positive touchdown in the middle of the runway, in the middle of the touchdown zone. That's much more what we were looking for. Good. Still no speed brakes though, can't get those to work. Ourselves again. Right, let's bring it to a stop and have a chat. Forward idle. Parking brake set. Welcome back to Newcastle. So here we are on the ground in Newcastle, and what do I think of this aeroplane? Well, it's an iconic aeroplane and a really pretty one, and it is really nice to have something from this generation available in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a very retro aeroplane. We've had the MD-11 recently, but this is taking it back a notch to the 1960s. I think the way they've got around having the 3-pilot issue, or having 2 pilots and the flight engineer, it's really, really good. I think it's worked really nicely to have that sort of crew management system where you can just ask for procedures to be done for you. It still feels like an authentic experience. You've got the sounds, which I think have been great all around. You've got the feel of the airplane, and it is one of the nicest handling airliners I've seen in Microsoft Flight Simulator, full stop. I absolutely love it. It's so nice to hand fly around the sky, which is great because you'll be doing a lot of that with this airplane, and especially with its manual thrust as well. So yeah, it's a really, really nice collection of things to really give you that retro experience without a huge difficulty of having to run the flight engineers panel as well. Or even having to run the pilot monitoring panel, and you do need that help with this airplane really if you're going to fly the flights in real time, because there's a lot going on. We've also got that navigation system, having the INS built into the machine, which is great fun to learn, super satisfying to use, and a real piece of aviation history. Overall, for the price, I think this is a nice machine, and certainly one that anyone should consider, especially if you're into your jet airliners or your retro jet airliners. It's great for these shorter haul routes and can get into a lot of little airports. You've seen how little runway we used here, even with the auto brake set very low. That's all then. There'll be more videos, guides, live streams coming to the channel soon, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.